artists about various elements. We're going to talk more about, less about history and more about architecture and architectural details. If any of you have been on this tour before, you know how historic and what a rich history Lamasco has, and that this was the main commercial area for the whole Lamasco area, which became independent before we got assimilated into Evansville proper. So I'm going to start by talking about this library. Now, how many of you, I guess I should be up here, how many of you know that this is a Carnegie library? This is a Carnegie library, and it's a twin to the one in Bayard Park. There are two buildings that look just like this in Evansville. I don't know if that's unique in the country, but it very well could be that there are two identical buildings on two different sides of town that were financed by Andrew Carnegie. The building was begun in 1909. Please be sure and sign in as that comes around. Building was begun in 1909, finished in 1912 at a cost of, take a guess, somebody. $10,000. Not too far off, $12,000. The style is called Beaux-Arts. It's French, and it combines a whole lot of different elements together, mostly classical. And interestingly, all this detail that you see, it's not stone, it's terracotta. So it is cast and fired, and it has a finish on it that withstands the weather. So all of this detail is terracotta, which beautifully beautifully complements the brick. The architect was a local fellow, Clifford Shotbell. He did a lot of things here in town. And as I said, it's identical to the one in Bayard Park. And there was something called the West Side Business Association, which spearheaded the fundraising. Carnegie gave money for the library, but we also had to give some money too. It wasn't that he just built the thing. So in order to raise the money on this side for this particular building, the West Side Business Association was the organization that spearheaded the fundraising. That organization is what we now know as the Nut Club. It was the beginnings of the Nut Club. So if you think about the Nut Club today, they're carrying on a wonderful tradition of civic improvement and civic pride. Now, we're going to just take a quick look around the corner. There's a Victorian house right around the corner here. Right on the corner there, you see the porch, and there's a tower on the side of it. That is the Lorenz house. Dr. John Lorenz built that house. He had, and we'll talk about it when we get down the street a bit. He was a pharmacist, and his pharmacy was right there in that red brick building that is now part of Smitty's, that has the striped awning in front. That was his pharmacy, and the family lived upstairs, which was very, very typical in the late 19th, early 20th century. There was a business on the first floor, and there were living quarters on the second floor. Many of these, as you look at these buildings up and down the street, you'll see, you can just imagine a store on the first floor and then living upstairs. And that's exactly what they did, and he did so well with his pharmacy that he built this beautiful this beautiful house here on the corner, moved into it in 1904. They lived there 1 year, and he was so sick of people rapping on the door saying, "I need medicine for my," and having to go back to the store, that he sold the house after 1 year and moved back up above the store. It was much easier just coming downstairs. And so in 1905, it was bought by a fellow named George Fisher for the grand sum of $6,000. But that is the house is in really very nice and original condition. It has new siding on it, but if you look, it has the original mullions in the windows. As I said, there's a tower on the side. It's just a sweet, sweet house. It was on the house tour when the Philharmonic Guild did the house tour on this side of town about, oh golly, it's probably been 9 or 10 years ago now.
Where was the pharmacy?
The pharmacy and it says Laval Block. That was built in 1884 by a fellow named Dr. John Laval. He was a physician and a druggist over on Main Street in Evansville, and saw that this street and this part of town was really booming and figured that he could make some money by building and renting out stores. And there are something like 1, 2, 3, 4, something like half a dozen storefronts down below there.
The original shopping mall.
It is. It's a strip shopping center from 1884. And you'll notice the detail of, it has round-headed windows with really nice detail in the round part. And the brickwork, one of the things that has always impressed me about Evansville in general is from the 19th century is the brickwork that is here. The masons who worked here were artists in their craft. They did phenomenally wonderful things that we only dream about doing today. If you look at the cornices now, and they've been enhanced with paint to kind of enhance the detail, but they really were exuberant with their craft. It's very little change from what it was like when it was built. And that's, was there any questions about the building? That's brain sandwich. But the building is not terribly remarkable architecturally, but it's old. It was built in 1883 for a fellow named Philip Mundo, and it was a saloon right from the start. And during Prohibition, when they couldn't sell alcohol, they sold soft drinks and ice cream. But as soon as Prohibition was lifted, they went right back to their roots.
He was talking about Hagedorn Tavern.
You'll see his name up in the top. This is the pharmacy that we talked about a little earlier. It was built in 1893 at a cost of $3,000. And again, I think one of the things was just the wonderful brickwork, and then the use of limestone with the bricks is such a terrific combination. The limestone together with brick is a great combination that they really complement each other wonderfully. And if you look carefully, in addition to the wonderful brickwork, there's and they're painted different colors to really enhance them. At the pediment there at the top, some really interesting things that are probably, and I don't know for certain, but they're probably iron or pressed zinc, pressed tin, that could very well have come from the local Mestre iron. They did a lot of that sort of thing with their storefronts.
It's something unique. It's got that fire escape on the side.
Yeah, I don't know when that was put on. I think that was probably, I don't know that that was terribly original from 1893, but it had very nice. Next door to it, the 1893 building is the Benjamin Nuremberg building. It was a furniture store when it was built. And you'll notice how similar the brickwork is and the limestone trim to the Lorenz building are the gaps where we've lost things. There was a department store on this corner that burned, I think, in the 50s. Some of you may remember it.
Jerry's Market.
Oh, it was Jerry's Market.
And then there was a bowling alley up above. They
Okay.
were redoing the lanes, and it caught up.
And that's when it burned. Originally built as a department store, but most folks would know it as Jerry's Market. And that's the kind of thing, to me, very noticeable when there's it's it's a party. The Nut Club makes good use of it now, but
And that was Franklin Theater.
yes, and I think I remember that building. I don't know when it came down, but I think I remember it being there and having seen it come down. And they've now made a nice little outdoor eating area out of it. Late 19th century up until now. This bank building, which you'll see says Old National Bank up there now, originally was built as the Franklin Bank. And you see in the very center there in that medallion, you see Ben Franklin with a couple of quotes of his: "Thrift is power, save and succeed." This was built in 1927. Indianapolis architects McGuire and Shook built it. It cost $100,000, and of course, at some point, merged with Old National, became an Old National Bank. Very neoclassical. With the whole facade is limestone, Indiana Bedford limestone, and the rest is all terracotta. Again, the griffins in the corners, or at the two sides, and in the center, the capitals on the columns, all of that's terracotta, cast, fired with a glaze. Now, I just have you been inside that building? Anybody not been inside this building? I want you to come. Oh, it's open now. I want you to, we will go in there because you have to see the vault. You have to see the vault. It was built in the days when the vault had to impress you with its security. Nowadays, it's all electronic, it's all on paper. You know, an account has it somewhere, it's all on paper. Money doesn't really mean what it meant in 1927. But in those days, a bank had to represent security, and that vault is an amazing thing. We will look at it. Or as Mutu furniture.
Moto.
Me
Moto.
too. Moto.
Yes.
See, I didn't grow up here. This was built in 1894. The building with the copper canopy over it. 1894. It was built as a hardware store, Simmons Hardware Store, and it remained a hardware store until 1909. And then again, you'll notice the same kind of great brickwork. That corbelled cornice is a very common kind of work in the 1880s and 90s. This has some interesting arched windows on the second floor, fully arched, and then two with cornice in the middle. Right next to it is, these are old notes. It says Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin store, yeah.
It was.
Yes,
Dime store.
it was built as it was built by some people named Conon, C-O-N-O-N, and it was just a commercial building that they built on spec and rented out. Frank Schlatter again built this building, and a fellow named Anton Kessler was the brick mason for it. And Anton Kessler did a lot of work around town, and again was one of those fellows that if you know his work, he was just an amazing artist with bricks. Just there's no other word for it. Conan's ran a saloon in one corner of it, and for a long time it was a 5 and 10 cent store. And apparently when it was built, and I don't know that you can see this at all today, but apparently when it was built there was a 2-story hall in the back of it that was rented out and social events happened there. The corbelling, the little panels that they actually created out of brick. And below the third story, between the second and third story windows, you see brick turned at 45 degrees, standing like this. Just really creative and interesting ways that we just don't do that today. It was built in begun in 1898, finished in 99. Talk about exuberant. It has fantastically carved limestone capitals on these two columns, and between these fabulous, huge arches in the middle, there is a, I guess it's a gargoyle. It's a reptile of some sort, a gargoyle, which every year somebody from the nut club puts a nut club hat on it, and they speculate on how long it's going to take before it comes down. Now, this year it has sadly covered the reptile, the gargoyle's face, so you can't really see it real well. But it's a pretty spectacular thing. Again, the brickwork is just phenomenal on this building, and the carved Romanesque details of the pilasters, capitals there. It's just spectacular. This building is owned by the Nut Club. Their headquarters are upstairs. 1911. Now imagine we were just looking at 1890s. Now we're looking 1898. Okay, this is 1898. Now we're looking at 1911 later. Look how different. Incredibly different. So plain. So much the influence of Chicago. In fact, this is again a Clifford Shotwell building, who did a lot of that Victorian stuff we looked at. He did this in what would be called the Chicago architectural style. In Chicago, at this point in time, a lot of the skyscrapers were being built, and a lot of architectural styles are being developed, and theories were being played out that resulted in some magnificent buildings in Chicago. This is an offshoot of that. These banks of windows, very, very plain, just a reaction to all the excess of the Victorian kind of building. This building that we're looking at now was built by a fellow named Jacob Fultz, and it was just a commercial block, originally built in 1904. This section, the 6 windows to the left, you can see the line in the brick. It's a very straight line. These 3 bays and the 3 windows to this side were built in 1905, were added on in 05, the next year. Originally built the first section and then added another section as well. There was a druggist in here, and Stinson Brothers store, and William Stinson was actually one of the Nut Club founders, the Businessmen Association. I don't know this, it's not in the notes, but it could very well be that the first floor ironwork, that cast ironwork that is now painted cream and picked out with gold detail, that could very well be Metzger.
It does look like Metzger stuff. My dad worked at Metzger back in the 50s and 60s.
It's
so not way back when.
Well, they were absolutely prolific. They sent stuff all over this country.
Stuff on North Main too.
Yeah. And they've done a very nice job. When we came to town in 02, this was a
Grizzlies.
That's it. Grizzlies. And it had plywood, T111 plywood painted red. And they've done a really nice job of bringing this building back to a really handsome state. The detail that they've highlighted with gold, the brickwork again is just wonderful on this building, although a little subdued compared to some of the Victorian stuff, the earlier stuff down the street. UCC, right back there on, is that Michigan? Yeah. St. Paul's UCC is probably one of the most vibrant, community-involved churches on this side of town. They do some phenomenal things. They do great stuff here in the neighborhood. The original church building was built in 1891. And then there were additions in 1922, 1935, 1961, and 1985. Every one of them different. If you walk up to the block, you'll see all sorts of different architectural styles that this building is. Each edition was built in quite a different way from the previous one. So it's really an interesting. I hate to use collage. I was going to say hodgepodge, but I was searching for a better term. It's an interesting collage. It's the stained glass in it is not the original. It's more modern, but really striking. It's got real thick stuff that and I'm not sure what's between the pieces of glass, but it's not lead, and it's very striking from inside when the light's coming through. If you'll notice on the tower, from the limestone curbing there, right above that corbelled brick, those little corbels that we've looked at before, there's a limestone, a horizontal piece of limestone. And you'll notice the brick above that is slightly darker. That was added, that was done later. That was, from that point up, was originally wood. And at some point, they rebuilt it in brick. But it's a little bit darker than the rest of the building. Straight across the street, painted in gray and white, is one of the most striking buildings here on Franklin Street. Helfrich Realty now. Originally the Gerke building. This was built in 1914 by, again, F. Manson Gilbert. Again, a druggist. We had a lot of now we have a lot of bars on Franklin Street. Back then there were a lot of druggists. But it is an absolutely wonderful neoclassical building, exuberantly neoclassical. You couldn't put much more on it, frankly. And I look at that and I think, you know, that building is south facing. It faces the south. When the sun is out, which we haven't seen a lot of any lately, but when the sun is streaming in, can you imagine the sunlight pouring into that second story? Fabulous Corinthian pilasters and grand detail. And when we get under there, we can look up and look at the brackets that are holding that cornice up. Every bit of it just encrusted with acanthus leaves and terrific detail.
We were talking about drugstores. The Carter building was Rice Drug.
All the chains have bought all the independents out now. There are very few left. Paul's is one of the few left. Building in gray and white. Was built in 1913 by the West Side Investment Company. It was a group of businessmen here on the West Side who created the West Side Investment Company to promote the West Side. They are the folks who encouraged Meade Johnson to come to Evansville when the cotton mill stood empty and he was looking for a place to relocate his business. And they were the folks that encouraged him and cajoled him into coming to Evansville, the West Side Investment Company. It was originally a furniture company, Matley Furniture, at least at one point. And this was the LST, I think it says bar.
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
There was a bar here
Okay, it was apparently the LST bar
during the war.
during the war. Now that,
No, it wasn't a shipbuilding, it was a bar.
What's the LST?
Pardon?
and remember the building that was very, very plain compared to the 1880s. This is very similar to that in a long run of windows. Very, very modern in that sense that instead of windows with single windows with walls between, bits of walls, a bank of windows like that. That's a very modern concept back in 1913. Plain than the Victorian buildings. You notice how they corbelled out some pilasters and created a panel in the middle with bricks, which is nicely highlighted in the paint here. Would not have been originally, but it's nicely highlighted here. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Building built again in 1913 for Bernard Harness. It cost $35,000 in 1913. He dealt in general merchandise, so it was just a department store basically. And again the notable feature of this building is that basketwork brickwork there in the facade. It's almost a greenish cast to it. Really interesting brick.
Were they windows or at one time?
No, it was built that way. It was built that way.
If I'm not mistaken, it was once a learner's department store.
It could well have been.
In the
Could well have been.
late 40s, probably early 50s it was. It was there for a long time. He was a Jew who lived out on the east side, but he was a very nice person.
Learner's Department
Does
Store
not
for
indicate
many years.
anything about that.
Learner's Department Store.
Else, and what you have to imagine is
Fire station.
what you have to imagine is a tower in the middle of that building, which held the bells that they would ring when there was a fire. The tower came down a long time ago and has been gone for a long, long time, but there are photos of it. If you're interested, you go to Willard. And actually, you might be able to go online to Willard's website and see photos of it with the tower. So imagine the bells clanging like mad and the horses running out of those arched openings with the fire truck behind, running the fire truck. And very soon, though, from horses they went to mechanical or automobile kind of things. And that's what's happened. All of our old fire stations, fire trucks have gotten so big that the openings are too small for them now, which is one of the main reasons we've left all these old fire stations and built new ones. These just simply aren't big enough. If you drive down Columbia Avenue and notice the fire station, the old fire station on the south side of Columbia and Heidelbach, the new one's right across the street. But you'll notice that in between the two arches, they took all the brickwork out and there's a steel beam to make it just a little wider to get in and out with big equipment. And eventually that wasn't even good enough and they had to build a new building across the street. But that's the reason that is like that. They were trying to make entrance and exit of that building easier for huge equipment. Thankfully, that didn't happen here.
What on First Avenue too?
Yeah, First is now isn't that? Yeah, I can't think. It's some kind of store like. I can't think what store it is, but yes, First, and there's also one over. There are a couple on Columbia actually. There's one there at Columbia and. Yeah. There's always something for sale out front. The detail on the Helfrich building here. These brackets, the corbels, just absolutely wonderful. It was a bank. Citizens. It was a glass box. You remember that? It was a glass box. It was very modernistic, extremely contemporary looking. And the dentists, Dr. Ashley and Roush, have done a pretty neat job of turning it into something that fits on Franklin Street really well. It's a really nice Victorian building now. It's from the 1990s or the 2000s. The Antique Mall has cast iron front as well, and it's a St. Louis company. The folks that built that building must not have liked the Metzger family because they didn't buy locally. They bought from a company in St. Louis, which we'll see in a minute. But you can see, even though it doesn't look like it, you can see this is cast iron. When you look at the very bottom, you see a little bit of rust. But it was a phenomenally successful building technique for commercial buildings, this cast iron. There's two Metzger companies here in town, at least several brothers, and they did very well and sold their product all over the country. There's a website, there's this fellow who, you may have heard him, he was here in town a couple of times, he's been in town talking about the Metzger firm, Metzger company. And he's produced a website that is trying to document all the Metzger storefronts all over the country. Now known as Weber Equipment, was originally built as an auto dealership. It was a Ford and Lincoln dealership built in 1923. There was this. You see this garage door here on the right. There was a runway that you could get cars actually up to the second floor. You could walk in. It was like a department store for cars. There were cars on the first floor, cars on the second floor. Long time ago, 1923. It's not been a car dealership for a very long time. In fact, during World War II, this was the employment office for Missouri Bridge and Iron, the LST folks, the folks that produced the LST. So if you wanted to work in the shipyard, you applied for work at this building, which is one of the wonderful things about it, that it has that connection to the shipyard. It is a pretty simple building, but I think it's really neat that the bowling pins still remain up at the top, on the parapet at the top. Now, often those things are gone. St. Boniface had them on the towers, on the corners of the towers, and they're long gone. But they're still, on this building they remain, all out of limestone in that limestone parapet.
Don't push out window.
Oh yeah, just like in the old school buildings.
Boston High School.
Yeah. Built in 1906, what is now First Federal Savings, was always a bank. It was built as, it doesn't say. Oh, West Side Bank. What a surprise. It was the West Side Savings Bank, I think. Built in a neoclassical style, really all in limestone, very wonderful detail. Originally, it was 3 bays, 1, 2, 3, and they added this whole section. It was actually about half the size. I have an old postcard that shows it as about half the size. But as you can see, there was originally a door there. You see where they filled in with limestone. It's a different color. And the corner it was not a corner entrance, but they remodeled the whole thing to have the entrance on the corner. I will say First Federal has done a great job of taking care of the building. They've recently repainted this, stuccoed the backside. There were some apartment buildings on the back that were built as part of the bank as income-producing properties that were in very bad shape. They took those down and stuccoed the back. And they're doing a wonderful job of maintaining the building. But it's a real treasure. Full ionic columns holding up the entablatures that have, well, you can see First Federal on the left, and it looks like it's the black, it looks like black glass, but it's something more permanent than that.
This is a West Side Nut Club building. You see the gargoyle up on the top with that West Side Nut Club hat on the gargoyle. But the detail of the gargoyle is just amazing.
We would never bother.
Simpson Church, built in 1913. Old National Bank. Old National Bank here, one of the classic old structures, and we're going to go see the vault inside. This is the inside of the bank. Absolutely beautiful. You see the vault.
Sorry, no pictures.
Okay. Bank established in 1834. Beautiful architecture. Absolutely fantastic. We just saw the inside of the vault. No more photos in the vault, but you look at the detail of the Indiana limestone, Bedford limestone window structure. Just absolutely classical building on West Franklin.
The name, I just had it on the gift card. I got it. It's good on 3, so I know how much thank you for.
I don't remember.
Not eaten at the Gerst house.
But you go in there, you see that old elevator and
It's a real experience, and you really ought to try it. You really ought to try it. How many have not? It's a fantastic building. We came to town in 2002 right after apparently the hardware store sold out, which is to my everlasting regret. I would have loved to experience that.
Oh, it was
especially
something. It
especially
was.
because we have an old house and we're always needing something oddball. You know?
It was like
They had everything.
Yes.
You know, I mean, just the classic, you know.
they had a ladder that was still there. It went down the
Rolls
wall.
down the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a great hardware store, but it's a great restaurant too.
Yeah.
So, and I'm so happy that it just isn't going to rack and ruin after they went out. It's been repurposed, which happens, but it's been repurposed well. The building was built in 1890 for a fellow named August Rosenberger, who was a retail grocer, and it evolved into the hardware store that many of you remember. Built in 1890, the entire front of that is cast iron. Everything you see there is cast iron. And it may very well be Metzger. They've never really determined whether or not it's Metzger or not.
If anybody ever read Wicker's story about Sousa or something like that.
Suda.
Suda.
Proper Suda.
He mentions all these businesses along the Franklin Street area, and it's very interesting to learn new tidbits.
It's a good little book, isn't it? This building, when you look at it, it combines so many details from so many different architectural styles, which is exactly what the Victorian era did. If this is nice and this is nice, putting them together is even nicer. So, and that's what I like about the Victorian era. You know, you just can't have enough, and it's really fun. It's a fun building. It has Italianate elements. It has very classical elements. It has the little mansard roof, French Empire, Second Empire elements. Just you name it, it's on there, and it just works so well together. I was looking to see on the notes whether the building's on the National Register or not. It does not say that it is. If it isn't, it should be, and easily could be, as a great example of its era, as well as an historic site as well. And actually, on the notes, Dennis, you know Dennis Al, right?
Yeah.
Dennis wrote, finest example of turn-of-the-century commercial architecture in Evansville.
Yeah.
Right here on Franklin Street. And I don't think anyone could dispute that.
While you're talking,
Oh, yes.
I do not know if it's open now, but if you have never been in that church, it is a spiritual experience. It is old world is what it is. It's old world.
My cousin came in from California and I said, "Are you ready to go to Europe?"
That's exactly right. Like I said, we live a couple blocks north, and when I look out our bedroom windows at night and the towers are lit up, I feel like I'm in Paris. It's really great.
Except it is a German church.
It's a German church, very German, and actually it owes a lot, the style owes a lot to the German Gothic architecture from Germany. The artisans that built it were probably very familiar with it, with that.
The altar is entirely wood.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's still there. I'm surprised
I am too, but I'm so happy it is.
I'm surprised it hasn't been burnt down.
It is a wonderful building. The church burned in 1901, I think. It was built in the 1880s. Oh, maybe it's on here. Let me look. We may have, oh yeah, St. Boniface. The parish was founded in 1880. Construction began on this building began in 1881. It was completed in 1883. And in 1902, there was a lightning struck it and it burned to the ground. The exterior wall stood, and they rebuilt the church in 1902 in almost the same style, using the exterior walls in almost the same style as the original. The towers are a bit shorter, as I remember, and the original building did not have the three side gables. The original building did not have those. But other than that, it's really similar to the original 1880s building. But again, wonderful, exuberant brickwork, and I know that building is on the National Register of Historic